Good evening, everyone. We will now begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will now hear from Dr. Burns.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm pleased this evening to begin my comments by sharing with you an announcement that our district has received $395,000 in a grant from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation to expand a program designed to promote equity and student achievement in our elementary schools. The grant will allow us to train elementary school staff in effective use of restorative practices, which help students treat others with respect during conflict and promote self-regulatory behavior. Restorative practices have already been successfully implemented in our middle schools as part of our Vision 2020 strategic plan. The practice not only benefits individual students, but also improves the overall climate and safety of schools. I congratulate our staff for their diligent efforts to secure this funding. I look forward to seeing it bear fruit in our elementary schools in the near future. And we have even more exciting grant news. We recently awarded 8 grants from our 4 Cs fund out of 54 proposals received. Winners hail from Athens Drive Magnet High School, Balcom Elementary, Middle Creek High, Millbrook Magnet High, Oakview Elementary, Poe Magnet Elementary, Rollsville Elementary, and Southeast Magnet High. The 4 Cs fund, as the name implies, is used to encourage collaboration, communication, creativity, and critical thinking above and beyond what is already found in our classrooms each day as driven by Vision 2020 strategic plan. One project will have students at Athens Drive collaborate to design a food truck prototype. Another will use virtual reality to promote equity and cultural understanding at Oakview Elementary. Yet another will have students at Balcom Elementary design a solar-powered, self-cooling model home. All 8 projects demonstrate exceptional potential to help students prepare for college, career, and citizenship. I'm proud of these educators for taking the initiative to submit the winning proposals. Hundreds of our students recently participated in highly successful performing arts events. On March 15th, about 300 students from 11 schools participated in the 22nd Annual Stars in the East Performance Showcase at East Wake High School in the auditorium. The event raises money for the East Wake Education Foundation, which advocates for schools in the eastern part of our district and operates an early childhood initiative called Family and Child Enrichment Services. As a side note, it was a pleasure to be in the audience that evening because 22 years ago, when Stars in the East was initiated, I served as principal at East Wake High School. That first Stars in the East, the inaugural event was held in the North Gymnasium that was unair conditioned. We didn't need it, but we were worried about it. The gym floor was covered in tarps. The food was catered by a local restaurant. The kids were excited. David Arnold, band director, and Kim Kozart, choral music director, staged it, produced it. We had kids in locker rooms and in hallways. Mm-hmm. Quite a contrast to what I saw recently in the auditorium, that beautiful auditorium, and the way it was staged. To say that that event has come a long way is to make an understatement, believe me. So congratulations to those in the eastern part of the county for that. And on March 7th, the 36th annual Pieces of Gold performance sold out at Memorial Hall in Raleigh. 30 schools were represented with 955 students appearing on stage and another 80 student technicians working backstage. It's an honor in and of itself to appear in Pieces of Gold, as more than 60 schools auditioned for the 40 slots available. Performing arts students learn to take risks, accept constructive criticism, revise their work, and deliver a compelling product. My hat is off to all of our performers as well as their dedicated music and dance instructors for putting on 2 memorable shows. finally tonight, kudos to East Wake Middle School's Tara Jones for being named the 2018 Wake County Public School System School Social Worker of the Year. Ms. Jones works tirelessly to ensure that students and their families receive the support they need, including frequent home visits. She also established a cyber cafe in her school where students with perfect attendance are able to spend their lunch period lounging in a space designed just for them, complete with video games, computers, and even a mini pool table. She's forged new partnerships with businesses and community members, finding them volunteer and mentorship opportunities within that school. East Wake Middle has seen an increase in positive behaviors, especially in attendance, as a result of these initiatives. Staff members like Ms. Jones show our commitment to supporting the whole student, taking care of their individual needs to put them in a position to learn and to thrive. Many, many thanks, Ms. Jones. That, Madam Chair, members of the board, concludes my remarks.
Thank you. I will just echo your sentiments about our 4Cs grant recipients. We also celebrated that night our national board certification and the recertification folks. And so, again, always exciting to experience a celebration. And I always say that HR, you all really know how to put on a party. And we often talk about, as we read and reread the feedback that came from our entire community, including parents, staff, and students regarding the superintendent search. And that's one of the things that I think we all keep going back to, as we heard you loud and clear, that it's important to recognize and celebrate the people who give tirelessly to Wake County. And so that's one of those ways that I want to lift up the work that we are trying to do. And we'll again, I think it's also important that you know that we are, as we search for our next superintendent, we are revisiting the words that you gave us, the feedback that you gave us, to ensure that we are absolutely reminding ourselves that we asked to hear from you and that we're keeping that. So the celebration was one of those reminders of this is what people are asking us to do, and appreciate the folks who work in our district. And we're about to do that again this evening, is appreciate the folks in our district. And so do know that we don't take the commitment and the give backs and the investments that you all give every day to our students and to our district, and we're extremely appreciative. Pieces of Gold remains one of my favorite. Curran Huey is no longer our reporter, but every year he says, every time you see students perform, you're going to say it's your favorite. He's right, I do. I also want to say that last year it was very sad when we were losing Liz, and I think it's important that I note that Freddie did a great job putting on a show. Every year it gets better, and I do realize it is indeed a production. And so my theme has been the last song that they do in unison, for those of you who've been to Pieces of Gold, which is Man in the Mirror. So every day I've been saying to my daughter, okay, what do we do? And she's like, yes, look at who we are. How do we examine who we are in the way that we are in this world? And that's what Man in the Mirror has meant to me throughout my years as someone who grew up in the Michael Jackson era. I loved it for different reasons then. Now I actually acknowledge what he was really saying in the song. I did not do that as a child. I was not that bright then. I was really just singing the lyrics and enjoying the rhythm. But the words are definitely important as an adult. And words are important, and celebration are important as well. And the accolades are important to our entire board and our entire staff for the commitment. I realize that my tenure as chair for 1 month probably seems like to many of you that I've been the chair for a year. I don't know that we've spent this much time together in a month for my entire 3 years prior to this year of me being chair. I apologize in advance. I do know that I'm an only child. I assure you that I am not wanting to just spend time with you. I do enjoy you all, but I think it's important that you know, and I'm looking to staff as well, that I know, Dr. Burns knows, and we want you to know, especially I do, that I get how hard you've been working. I know how many hours you've been putting in. And so I'm giving as good as I'm saying to the folks who work for us that you all have done the same thing. 2 days in a retreat last week does not go unnoticed. Asking people to listen, to digest, and to only ask for understanding and clarification is not easy for adults who are actively engaged and actively committed in trying to figure out every day how to make our district better. But you all hung in there. I mean, seriously hung in there, I have to say. And I know that it wasn't an easy task, but I think you all need to hear me say publicly that as chair, I know I've asked a lot. And I appreciate you hanging in there, and I appreciate that you've supported me and said to me openly that you understand why we're going this hard and this fast. And I think I can say without a shadow of a doubt that this entire board and our entire staff who sits to my left are all in for this district. And by all in, I mean we heard from our young people not just performing today, but actually hearing their voices that I always call my checkpoint. They're my accountability. And we heard from them today that the hard work that we did, looking at suspension data, diving deep into our academic data and how we know where the gaps are. I think Dr. Martin talked about the line that we can draw. We are saying it, and we are totally going with the analogy of a thermostat versus thermometer, that we are trying to figure out how to adjust the temperature and not just say that this is the temperature. And so I applaud you all for that, and I'm sorry for taking, I told Tom Benton I'm going to keep using point of privilege, but I did take a point of privilege and take longer than general and usual to thank you all for the hard work and for hanging in. And we're not done. That's the other part too, is we are not done, and we are still actively working on our superintendent search, and I think that's also important to make sure the public knows that we are actively engaged. And so there are countless hours that you can see the work that we're doing and countless hours that each of you are doing behind the scenes, and I appreciate that. Last statement is, in addition to all the work, we will have our joint meeting next Monday with our county commissioners, and so we are also preparing for yet another long day of work, and I look forward to the work that we'll continue to do on behalf of our entire district. Thank you. Dr. Martin.
Thank you, Chair Johnson Hustler. And I would just want to say, as a board, thank you for the hard work you're doing as well. I mean, this is a team effort, and I think we're all proud to be part of this board. When you're doing real work, it's hard, but it's good to see it happening. I, too, was excited about the Piece of Gold, as I always am. It's a fantastic event that does get better every year. The level of art was high. It wasn't just performance. It was speaking through art, which my children, who are both artists, taught me that artists have a way of using a voice that's not just words. And there were plenty of words there as well, but the art was high, the content was amazing. And I also want to give a real shout out to Freddie Heath for his work in moving the ball forward on the diversity aspects of Pieces of Gold. Several years ago, when I was first on the board, I really noticed that and called it out and said, you know, it's my goal that all of our arts, all of our performance should look like our schools. We shouldn't just have one sector of kids in the art classes and everybody else at the school. And Mr. Heath has really taken that on and is moving it forward. We still have a long ways to go, but real progress is observed. I think that was outstanding. Ms. Mahaffey and I had an opportunity to meet with the Fuquay Chamber of Commerce. It's always good to build those kind of relationships. That was a positive event. Unfortunately, that meant we had to miss the celebration for the National Board Certified Teachers. So I want to take this time to congratulate all of the new National Board Certified Teachers and all those whose certification was renewed. This is a very important effort. Fantastic work. It was yesterday. A couple of us were at the Habitat for Humanity breakfast. And again, I want to just highlight how important partnership with that organization is to our district. Several of our teachers and staff are Habitat homeowners. Many of our students are Habitat families. And sometimes it's easy to get lost in the data of performance statistics, but you want to really move the needle on achievement? Let's start addressing poverty, having a safe home over your head, a safe place to go home to, having meals on a regular basis. That moves the needle, and partners like Habitat are incredibly important for part of that work. And finally, I want to thank the students from Menlo High School, as well as the teachers and administrators who came today. You know, their NLO 5, proximity, visibility, connection with students, checking for understanding, and addressing race. That is the work that we need to be about in every classroom, in every school, and with this board. So very proud of that group for sharing and moving us forward. Ms. Johnson Hostler and I talked about it. We usually celebrate Black History Month in February. And as we talked about it, we didn't just want a show. We wanted the real work. And we saw the real work. And this isn't just about a month recognizing Black history. This is about system change, and I couldn't be more proud of that work. Thank you.
We will now do round robin, starting with you, Mr. Sutton.
All right. I wanted to thank I was out of town last week, so I was able to watch my colleagues work very hard at work session last week. So I appreciate the hard work y'all have been put in, and just want to note that I picked up 2 due process appeals just to assuage my guilt of missing last week. So just know I did. I'm trying to do a bit of lifting. Also, wanted to add my congratulations to the artists who were Stars of the East and Pieces of Gold, as well as our National Board Certified Teachers. It's a great week 2 weeks to have celebrated our excellence in Wake County schools.
On tonight's agenda, one topic is the East Wake Middle School construction project. This plan includes the demolition of a 28-year-old structurally sound facility and the addition of 536 seats to a school reported in the feasibility study is not being centrally located, requiring busing of most students. The presented renovation costs and feasibility study are artificially inflated and intentionally misleading. My efforts to alter this course have met with complete resistance. This is the same resistance to explore any suggestion of means and methods to reduce facility cost and increase speed in providing new seating capacity. I've also been quite vocal with this board on the long history of mismanagement of the facilities and maintenance departments, and have provided examples of department heads violating board policy. Over the past 15 months, staff has provided information that is questionable and so voluminous that the critical evaluations required is not possible in the time durations allowed. There has been no willingness by the board to stop and do the detailed work to fully understand the whole truth of the many items I've questioned. My desire to look into details has been criticized as being outside the scope of the Board of Education. To this statement, I take great exception. During board discussions involving cost reductions on capital projects, I have heard far too many times that pursuing potential savings of $1 million or more is not worth the effort. I can never accept that position. This East Wake Middle School issue has made it clear to me that my efforts to bring recognition to the need for new management and new direction from the board concerning our facilities construction and renovation needs will continue to be ignored. I felt it necessary to state all these reasons for my position that I will not support the proposed capital improvement bond. Thank you.
My theme tonight is gratitude. I want to thank, he was around earlier, I can't find him right now, but Russ Smith, our Director of Security, did a wonderful job at my back meeting to talk about security and the measures that we're taking. And one of the things that I'm really very appreciative of with Mr. Smith is that he is so open and willing to answer parents' questions. You just simply email him and he will get back to you. Been very impressed with the work that he's doing. I want to thank a lot of our families for the work that they're doing with me, in collaboration with me. You've heard me talk about my Kathy Chats, and they are really some of the highlight of my work that I'm doing on the board, because I get to hear from the people that it matters most to in terms of what decisions we make here. And I feel I make better decisions when I hear from families and what their needs are and what they need in their schools and what their children's needs are. So I'm very appreciative to the families that come out and talk to me and give me their ideas. I want to especially thank, because I'm looking at them now, look up from your computers. Thank you. Mr. Overman, you were the first. Good job. See, I haven't forgotten how to be a teacher. Thank you for the work that you put into having all of the data, all of the information, everything we needed for our work session. It was a mammoth job, and I am really grateful, and I think I have a real deep understanding of what it takes to do that. And I really appreciate what effort and extra hours it took to give us the information that we needed so that we could have a really good work session. It was, it's hard work, but it is really good work, and I'm really pleased with how our board works together to find the best for our district. I also want to thank the Morrisville Town Council. They issued an invitation for us to come and talk to them. So Mr. Fletcher and I met with them yesterday and had a great conversation about what are some future possibilities for small print high schools. What might we look at as different ways to use available land or buildings? And it was just a great conversation about sharing ideas and looking at barriers and what possibilities might be there. So it's always great to work with our municipalities and bringing together good ideas. So I want to thank them for that. And so that's my gratitude for today. Thank you.
Tomorrow I'll be having a community chat at Eva Perry Library, and I want to also, I have a couple of thanks. One to Miss Pish's class. They are first graders at Holly Grove Elementary, and as part of their Readers Are Champions program, I was able to share with them my children's love for the book Scaredy Squirrel. I want to thank the Cary Chamber for recognizing and allowing our principals to take the time to sit and eat a warm lunch. Today, it's always a very generous thing for them to do for our principals, because they have a lot going on during the day, and I can't thank them enough for taking the time to recognize these folks. At the elementary level, I got to see our Chromebooks in action as part of our 3-to-1 device rollout. Our Chromebooks are touchscreen. Our first graders and kindergartners have QR codes, so they don't have to hunt and peck for their number. They hold up their QR code to the camera, and it just reads it for them. They are tools to help with collaboration and learning, and I just want to share a huge thanks to our technology team for making this happen and getting these rolled out, because to see it in action was just phenomenal, and just taking the time to get those in the classroom. So thank you very much. I know they've been waiting, but it's been well received is what I understand. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to tag team on a couple of things. My colleagues have shared, Ms. Hartenstein shared about our meeting with members of the Morrisville Town Council and staff. And part of our discussion was also about the possibility of co-locating teacher housing or medical offices in a new school structure. So we build a school that may be 3 stories tall. What about story 4, 5, and 6? What are the opportunities to co-locate facilities that are needed by other parts of our community, or to deal with the targeted income or affordable housing strategy that would support our teachers in finding places that they could live? And it was a very positive conversation about how we might look at doing things differently. It's just the start. It's the first conversation. And we've got a lot of other municipalities and uniform development ordinances to deal with, and a lot of things to learn internally about what would an academic program look like in a smaller footprint school and those things. So it's a start. Glad to have started it. Also, with Ms. Mahaffey, I was appreciated being with the principals today from the Cary area schools, the Learning Academy for Math, Science, and English, and the Taylor Family YMCA sponsored that a sumptuous lunch and respite from the madding crowd today, and give a shout out to the Cary Chamber for their continuous support. Last night, my board advisory councils tackled some tough issues. We talked about the elementary discipline report that we recently received. We talked about the potential class size fixes that we'll hear more about tonight at this board meeting. And we also talked about what has been in place in Wake County as a result of some of the work of Mr. Sutton and the countywide safety task force that was put in place in 2013. And I want to make a reference to one of the items in that report. It's item 5 that says each WCPSS school should have a full-time, highly trained staff of therapeutic professionals, including counselors, social workers, psychologists, and nurses. This proposal was put on the table in 2013. We haven't made a dent in it yet. Hopefully this year's budget cycle will be able to do that. What did we hear today from our wonderful students from Enloe that shared their experiences with us? That relationships drive the world. It occurred to me last night at the BAC, and sometimes things just fly into my brain. You know, I asked the teacher, the principals there, I said, is anywhere in the pacing guide does it say take 15 minutes to build relationships? And yet it is the fundamental thing we must do person to person in order to be successful with our students. So I really want us to deal with that as we go forward, and both financially, in terms of how we're able to add other people to our cadre of quality employees and providing services to our students, and to really provide positive intervention that will help young people learn to make better decisions and take advantage of the opportunities they're providing to them in our schools. So I'll leave you with that. We've got work to do ahead of us, and I'm looking forward to continuing to attack that with our board. Thank you.
Ms. Cash, I'll give you a moment to catch your breath. No comments? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll now entertain a motion to approve our agenda.
Motion to approve, move to approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and second. All in favor, please know by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Thank you. We'll now move to our Human Resources Celebration, which is our Employee Excellence Award. They'll be recognized tonight by Mr. Jason Kennedy.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Burns. It is my pleasure to bring you this evening the March 2018 recipients of Wake County Public Schools Employee Excellence Awards. Awardees, when I call your name, please come to the front and be greeted by Dr. Burns and remain up front until all recipients have come forward. Donna Barther, Cafeteria Manager, Holly Ridge Elementary. Donna Barther is nominated by Holly Ridge Administration as well as all of the HRES cafeteria workers. Ms. Barther has been our manager for 2 years and working on the cafeteria line. Her crew maintains a clean and healthy cafeteria environment. Our inspections have included a 100 plus many 98s and 99s. This year, Ms. Barther has been asked by CNS to manage 2 elementary schools because of her commitment and excellent job skills. We totally agree Ms. Barther is an excellent employee who deserves recognition. Rebecca Johnston, Head Custodian, Holly Ridge Elementary. Ms. Johnson started at Holly Ridge Elementary as a part-time custodian. In less than 5 years, she has moved from part-time to full-time to head custodian. Teachers consistently recognize and comment on her hard work and effort. She will do lunch duty when needed. She even helps proctor during testing. The students and staff respect and appreciate Ms. Johnston. We believe Ms. Rebecca Johnston is very worthy of the Employee Excellence recognition. Gussie Marshalsey, Fine Arts teacher, Fine Arts instructor, Pleasant Grove Elementary. Mrs. Marshalsey is an exceptional instructor for her students. The talent she brings out in each of her students is unsurpassed. Their artwork displayed in our halls has amazed many visitors to our building, family members of staff, students, and all who enter our school. Her accolades are numerous, such as being a place winner with our students' work at the NC State Fair. She goes above and beyond for all, not only with creativity and collaboration, but with her tremendous golden heart. Lisa Meeks, science teacher, Martin Magnet Middle School. Journey to the center of the earth. Wear your hard hat, ride the waves, polish your surfboard, dissect an atom, get your microscopes ready. A day in Mrs. Meeks' class is a real-life adventure with Mrs. Frizzle, exploring each standard in a hands-on interactive way. What happens each day in science is often the buzz during students' conversations. Because of their engagement, they connect their learning to other content areas, making analogies and transferring vocabulary. She drives students to do their best, seek their best, and be their best. And because of her, they know they can. Kelly Morris, special education teacher assistant, Davis Drive Middle School. Kelly Morris goes above and beyond when working to help teachers with students' needs. She has been very helpful working with refugee students who are struggling not only to learn the content, but also to adjust to their new environment. Ms. Morris always has students' academic and emotional interest in mind, and you will never find her idle. If she has an extra second in a day, she will happily give students and/or teachers her support. Marcella Rory, Senior Administrator, Design and Construction. Marcella is a senior facility planner in facilities design and construction and has been a WCPSS employee for over 20 years. She oversees the planning and design of multiple new schools and major addition renovation projects throughout the county. Marcella was specifically selected as a senior facility planner for special projects such as the Wake NCSU STEM Early College High School and the new Southeast Raleigh Elementary. The facilities planning and design team is pleased and proud to have Marcella Rory to be recognized and honored with an Employee Excellence Award. Julie Scott, Special Education Teacher Assistant, Wake Forest Middle School. Ms. Scott is reliable, constant source of support in the classroom and on her out-of-classroom duties. She is always willing to step in and help her colleagues with no expectation that the favor be returned. When the teacher's schedule is full and IEP meetings are scheduled during class time, Mrs. Scott can be counted on to lead the class with enthusiasm and fidelity. Whenever any of the students have a problem or feel stressed out, they come to her because they know that she will be there with a solution and a shoulder to cry on. Jennifer Tharrington, Special Education Department Chair, Davis Drive Middle School. Mrs. Tharrington is a special education teacher who co-teaches in language arts and math classes and teaches the 7th grade academic skills lab elective. She also serves as a special education department chair and helps all teachers implement practices that allow students to be successful. Ms. Tharrington works closely with the families of her students to ensure all learning needs are being met and that students are receiving the most appropriate services and accommodation. Davis Drive Middle School is a better place because of Mrs. Tharrington's expertise and willingness to do whatever is needed to help her, the students, and the staff. Geraldine Watson, bookkeeper, West Cary Middle School. Ms. Watson came to our school during a time of transitional change and was not afraid to take on the hardest of tasks. She has embraced her role as a bookkeeper and understanding the responsibilities that come with the job. Every morning is greeted with a happy Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever day it is. In the words of the late Dr. Jim Hedrick, she is one of the hardest workers I've ever seen. The words of Dr. Hedrick ring true. Geraldine Watson is a lifelong learner and public servant who has made West Cary Middle School a better place and will continue to make all of the days brighter for whoever she works with. On September the 27th, the Wake County Public School System was awarded a $14.9 million Magnet Schools Assistant Program grant from the U.S. Department of Education. This is the largest competitive grant ever awarded to the district. Countless efforts and many months were spent preparing the district's winning application by a dedicated group of individuals representing many departments across the district. This grant was a team effort, and the contributions of each and every individual noted ensured the success of the proposal. Angie Wright, Senior Director, Office of Grants and Strategic Advancement. Beth Cochran, Senior Director, Magnet and Curriculum Enhancement Programs. Office of Grants and Strategic Advancements, Cindy DeFore, Nayamka Muse. Office of Magnet and Curriculum Enhancement, Tasha Hayes, Lisa Thompson, Tamani Anderson Powell, Paul Domenico, Sherry Golden Perry, Jody Gupton, Catherine Yarborough, Nydia Smith. The Office of Finance, Trish Posey. Student Assignment, Ms. Maya Vuk. Data Research and Accountability, Roger Regan and Matthew Leonard. Congratulations to all the recipients. Now, if we can have all the recipients turn and face the board to be greeted from our chairman.
Thank you all very much again. There's not enough gratitude in Ms. Hartenstein's words to express the amount that we feel towards the work that you're doing. One thing I want to say, Ms. Powell, I'm going to try to get a small child out of trouble before they go home, that it is very patient. He has patiently waited. And he's been in school all day, sitting in a chair, most likely. So I will ask that you allow him a little grace tonight. I saw the whole mommy shut down. So I'm just trying to save a little young man in the audience today. So I feel like that. So I have a lot of gratitude for everybody this evening, and I'm also expressing some to your son. So spare him. I'm always pleased, and we have several children in the audience, and I'm always pleased with the way they patiently await for your names and your accolades to be called, but most importantly, they also have to listen to us to get to this point. And so while we are very gracious for the work that you do, we are also gratefully and completely understand that you can leave after this unless you'd like to stay. Please feel free to stay. But we also honor and respect that your families are here to acknowledge and support you in all that you do, and we also know that they should receive accolades for the long nights that all of you put in. And as someone who's written way too many grants than I'd like to say, I definitely commend the acknowledgement of all of the staff and recognizing that it takes an entire team to do anything that we do in this district, and that we all are recipients as well. And we also all know we also get the fault when things aren't great. And so this is our moment to have you all shine for the greatness that you've done. Thank you. And to all of my young people who are joining us, thank you all, and enjoy your evenings. Thank you. And we'll take a short break to allow you all to transition for those of you who do want to depart. Thank you all for bearing with us if we took a short transition break. We will now resume with public comment. Citizens who sign up to address the board during public comment will be called on in priority order, first for items on the agenda and then for items not on the agenda. Each individual speaker will be allowed 3 minutes for remarks. Specific personnel or student matters are not appropriate for this public comment setting, but may be addressed through applicable WCPSS personnel, the grievance policy, or other applicable policies. I think they're still transitioning, but I can assure you we'll be able to hear you and pick up on the mic. First, we have Robert Ward.
Do I have to hit a button or anything? No? School board members, I feel I was led here today because I fear that you have not given the public enough information to make an informed decision. In the world of real estate and finance, there is a term that it is used, that is called due diligence. Are you 100% sure, as you sit here today, that this building is not a sound structure for our children to continue to learn? How many citizen contractors have Wake County Public Schools invited to evaluate these schools? There has got to be a way to save this building. It is up to the school board to find a way. Unless this building is crumbling from the bottom to the top, there's got to be a way to not only save it in a fiscally responsible manner, but one that will satisfy your concerns, the parents' concerns, and taxpayers who entrust you with their hard-earned cash. No one in this room, no one in this audience, no one on this board wants our children to fail. No one wants that. Our children are the future, but how many people on this board, how many people in this room have lived in a house, that live in a house that is 30 years old? I know I do. I would dare say the majority of people in this room live in a house that is 30 years old. Surely they wouldn't tear down their house. This investment should last for at least twice as long. If there is a failing of material in this school, we need to evaluate and address its inadequacies, not just for the school, but for any school going forward. Broughton High School was built in 1929. Raleigh Charter was located in the Pilot Mill building. That building was built in 1903. If we can renovate a 100-year-old school, surely we can do the same for one that is only 28 years old. Sometimes the expensive way isn't always the best way, and the cheapest way isn't always the best way, but surely using what we have to the best of our abilities is always the best way. Thank you for your time and consideration. God bless.
Ed Jones.
He is not here.
He is.
Oh,
Yeah, I thought so.
Beltline had a bad accident and I couldn't get out of it, so it took me a long time to get here, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Folks, on Sunday afternoon after leaving church at the Presbyterian Church on Oberlin Road, my wife and I took a little different turn. We came down St. Mary's Street. And when we got to Fairview Road and drove on down toward Glenwood Avenue, I was reminded of something that happened well over 50 years ago. Over 50 years ago, I remodeled a number of houses in that long block between Fairview Road and Glenwood Avenue. I've been a remodeling contractor in Raleigh for a long, long time, and I ran one business over 50 years. Now, when I remodeled those houses, and my recollection of the work I did on the first house there was digging a basement under an existing house. And I don't know how I got into that business, but I did several of those, and I can tell you that's a bad job to do. But one of those houses in that block of St. Mary Street, I dug a basement under the house. That was the first project. And I probably worked on 8 or 10 houses in that long block. And when I worked on those houses at least 50 years ago, all those houses would have been considered old houses. Now, you all are talking about tearing down a perfectly good school building, East Wake Middle School, as I understand it, and that building's only 28 years old. The house that my wife and I live in today is well over 50 years old. It's in North Ridge, and it's a perfectly good house. I suggest to you to take another look at this business of tearing that school down when you have a perfectly good building there. It's strong structurally. I've seen pictures of it. I've seen the information that you all have considered. And there's nothing wrong with that building. You're being misled with information that is not true. I went to State College and I took civil engineering. I've never practiced civil engineering, but I've done an awful lot of remodeling on homes and light commercial construction. What those buildings need, some of your other school buildings as well as that building needs, is some tender loving care. It needs a little power washing. It needs a little work on it. I saw the picture, some of the efflorescence of the mortar coming out of the brickwork. That is the way that mortar work in bricks often occurs. It's not anything wrong with it. It just needs a little cleaning, a little power washing. So I'll appreciate your consideration of the taxpayers' money being spent wisely. And I would ask you the question, if this was your personal money, tearing down a perfectly good home or building to replace it with another building that's going to cost more money, it may not be as good, as well built as the building that you already have, would you spend your money in that manner? I don't believe that you would, and I ask you to consider that as you consider tearing down this perfectly good building and replacing it with one that's probably not going to be as good as what you have. Thank you.
Jonah Silver.
Thank you all for giving me the time to be here today. My family has been in Knightdale since pre-Revolutionary War. That's about 11 generations. I'm 11th generation in Knightdale. Pre-Knightdale, actually. We grew up in a house built in 1848. That house is still in great working order due to a lot of work and money and love put into it, but I'm sure as heck not going to let all the school children come and learn in my house. I think the school, as East Wake Middle School, needs a little bit of work. It does. I think it needs so much work that I would like to see that we have a brand new school built on already developed property, ready to roll. I'm the son of a retired Wake County public school teacher and the product of Wake County and North Carolina public school system as a graduate of UNC Greensboro. I'm also the parent of a 7th grader at East Wake Middle School. I've got 2 more kiddos on the way that are ready to start in about 5 years at the brand new East Wake Middle School. My family prides itself to say that we are from Knightdale in the East Wake community. And today I represent myself as a parent, but also represent my membership with the K-12 Education Alliance of East Wake. K-12 is a representation of the wide spectrum of diverse population in Eastern Wake County, and we are proud to support the demolition and rebuilding of East Wake Middle School and possible renaming to Knightdale Middle School, considering it is in the Knightdale town limits. A beautiful new school would be a crown jewel in East Wake and would allow my kids the access to quality facilities that would help them learn. That's all I have to say, and I appreciate your time.
April Major.
Good evening. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I feel like I've kind of come at this at the very end of the process since you all are about to vote on this approval of this East Wake Middle School. But just to let you know, I'm the oldest of 9 children, and my parents were janitors for our school district. And I'm an engineer by education and by profession. And just looking at the facts of this particular scenario and always wanting to get to the root cause, because that's what I do. I like to eliminate the root cause and move on. There's always opportunity for continuous improvement. It appears to me in this case that East Wake Middle School had some significant issues when it was first built, and those issues were not resolved. And now they've turned into a very poor environment for the school, for the students, and especially for the teachers. And so it's unclear to me why we would want to go ahead and now spend additional taxpayer dollars to resolve a problem that really should have been taken care of by the contractor long ago. And the issues of East Wake Middle School have been known since 2007 when they were first reported on. And so this issue has been ongoing forever, and I don't understand why we can't go ahead and just try to spend this money a little bit more wisely and be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, knowing that even if we go ahead and build a new school, that we will not still have this issue 20 or 30 years from now. There's no guarantees. And so there needs to be something more proactively put in place, either in the requirements of the contract where we hold these people accountable, or we go ahead and we audit or inspect these properties on a regular basis so that we don't let them go and deteriorate to the point they are at today. Thank you very much.
Holly Alberts.
Good evening. My name is Holly Alberts, and I am one of the many parents that has been advocating for the children of Abbott's Creek since September. Our advocacy efforts cast a wide net that range from speaking at the local school board multiple times, all the way up to face-to-face meetings with our legislators. Our group also emailed, called, and tweeted our representatives urging them to fix the ill-prepared mandate, and then we emailed, called, and tweeted them again. All the while, our children watched. They asked questions. They helped us make signs. They attended the rallies and the school board meetings. They asked more questions. They cheered for us when we were interviewed on the news. I'm proud that the children watched us fight for them, and when the mandate was finally retooled with a smarter rollout, they saw that parents can be a catalyst for positive change. Many of us in our parent coalition applied for a hardship transfer to remain at Abbott's Creek, citing stability, academic achievement, and proximity as we all live in neighborhoods across the street from the school. As a rising fourth grader, my son's request was approved. However, we were in the minority. Now that the mandate has a more manageable rollout timeline, and several families who were originally a part of this have pursued alternative schooling options, there remain families that do still desire to stay at Abbott's Creek. So we ask that the school board approve that families and future siblings that applied for hardship transfer are allowed to remain at Abbott's Creek. On a separate note, our assigned school that we were assigned to is Fox Road Elementary School. And several of us did take the opportunity to go to Fox Road, and we met with Dr. Lewis and Mrs. Hayes. And it was such a lovely experience. And I was so happy that we went and we saw the school, we saw what they were doing at the school, and it was clear from Dr. Lewis and Mrs. Hayes that they are proud of their school, they are proud of their students are proud. When we took the tour, the children just automatically came to the door, and they stood there and they waited, and they told us what was happening in their classroom. And we asked, did you tell them we were coming? And she said, no, this is just what we do. When visitors come, the children come to the door and they explain to the visitor what is happening. So I thought that was phenomenal. So great things are happening at Fox Road as well. So I thought that the board would like to know that as well. Thank you.
Rita Rakestraw.
Hi, my name is Rita Rakestraw. I'm the president of the PTA at East Wake Middle School, and I want to tell you a little bit about East Wake Middle School. East Wake Middle is full of determined teachers and spirited students. My son, Paul, he's in the 7th grade, and he loves school. He's in the band, and the band just got an excellent rating at the all-county competition on Thursday. And they have an energetic and enthusiastic band teacher named Miss Duryea. And all the teachers there are really super hard workers. And I haven't met any teachers there I don't like. Many are young and enthusiastic. In East Wake Middle School, we participate in the National PTA Reflections Art Contest, and this year we had a 7th grader, Jaden Bond, who won first place in visual art for Wake County, and now he's going on the state level. He's going on to the state level. The school used to have gangs, but a long time ago, but unfortunately some people think that it still has that reputation. And our principal, Ms. Boyer, has done wonders for the school to turn things around since she's been there. And we have 2 great assistant principals that are amazing, and they have great repertoire with the kids. So there are great things going on at East Wake Middle, and I would love it if you all would come visit us. And I know some of you have. And I think we really do need a new school. It'd be a great investment, a sturdy, strong, beautiful school that would last 100 years. When you examine the assessment of Wake County Public Schools that they did, the staff did, of all the repair needs at East Wake Middle, you'll notice not a lot of difference in cost to do all the necessary repairs and overhauls as opposed to the cost of building a new school. So with a new school, I'd like for you to consider a new name change too, like Knightdale Middle School or Neuse River. And this would give the new school a fully fresh start and leave behind any remaining false impressions. The school address is technically Raleigh, but the land was annexed by Knightdale in 2006. Also, one other thing you might not know is there's a new development of houses that are going to be built soon across the street from East Wake Middle, so we're going to need some room to grow. Thank you.
Angela Humphreys.
Hey there. East Wake Middle School, let's look into the details, pursue potential savings, evaluate the need for new management. Mr. Aggie and our citizens have valid concerns that deserve echoing. Let's look into the details. For instance, I read the school is equipped with what could be a 70-year-old modern roof. Also read that there exists water standing on the building exterior. That doesn't seem like a definitive need for demolition, but maybe a sealant or a new layer of exterior paint. The fact that the school isn't located in a centralized location puzzles me as to why the board would vote to demolish and then reconstruct. Recognizing the need for evaluating the management, overseeing these county projects is an important and concerning issue. Does the entire board not support preservation and conservation where possible? Is the board thinking about saving money or acting conservatively? Or are we just acting on one-sided, anybody listening? One-sided recommendations. Is management here to speak about the issues raised by Mr. Aggie? Having a conversation seems like it would be very helpful, not only to entertain the idea of saving money, but to clear the air and make this understandable to the public. I appreciate any remarks and comments and would like to encourage a conversation now to address the concerns. Thank you.
Kate McDonald.
I brought a visual. Hope that's okay. Thank you. My name is Kate McDonald, and I stand before you representing the unified interest of my neighborhood, Abington. Abington is a custom home subdivision in Apex, consisting of 433 houses. Every one of those homes, whether they have students in the Wake County Public School System or not, want Abington to have a traditional calendar school option. In the 20 years that Abington has been around, we have been assigned and reassigned to a total of 18 different schools. Think about that, 18 schools in 20 years. But never have we been denied access to a traditional calendar option, never until this year. For years, our base middle school was Apex Middle. When it changed to Lufkin, Apex Middle remained an option. This year, our traditional option changed to Apex Friendship Middle School. We were concerned about this change and what it meant for our ability to attend traditional calendar schools. When a large group of our rising 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students were denied assignment to both Friendship and Apex Middle, these fears were realized. It appears that our neighborhood will not be allowed to attend a traditional middle school, even one to which we are willing to provide our own transportation. Board members, we want a school choice that is truly an option. We are coming before you tonight to ask for your help. We want the children of Abington to be able to attend Apex Friendship Middle School. I urge you not to turn your backs on us. We are the parents that do everything in our power to support our school system. We are your PTA, your boosters, your fundraisers. We proctor the exams. We arrange gifts for our bus drivers. We chaperone field trips. We send in pencils and tissues when supplies run low. We sign up to be class parents, and we vote in favor of school bonds. We consider ourselves partners with you in the education of our children. We support you, and we hope that you will do the same for us. Abington might not always agree on everything, but when it comes to issues that affect our neighborhood, we stand united. We urge you not to leave us feeling disenfranchised. We are a motivated, involved group of residents, and we are eager to know that you hear and appreciate our concerns. Your stated vision is that all of your students will be prepared to reach their full potential and lead productive lives in a complex and changing world. We share that vision. We pledge through our words and actions to help make that vision a reality. But we ask in return that you give us options that are truly available to us, that you support us and our needs as we support you and yours. We ask that you not force families to have children on different calendars. We ask that you stop reassigning us and allow us to send our children to Apex Friendship Middle School. Thank you very much.
Sarah McDade.
Good evening. My son Mitchell is a second grader at Abbots Creek Elementary, and I'm sure you're all aware we have been embattled in this reassignment plan since September. And I know Holly, I was going to go into what we've been through, but Holly very eloquently explained about that. We were able to meet with some school board members, some members of administration, and our principal because we were convinced that there was room for our kids at Abbots Creek. We were told that the class size mandate was the reason for reassignment, so we asked what happens if the mandate gets fixed, and we were told that this would all go away. So we got organized, and to be cheesy and quote my favorite book, thus began our longest journey together. We called and wrote our representatives in the legislature relentlessly. We even got a meeting with Senator Alexander. We spoke at press conferences. We were interviewed by the press. We went to rallies, one of which was in 15-degree weather for 4 hours. I took a lot of time off of work, but was willing and glad to do it because I knew that if the mandate was fixed, our kids could stay. And it worked. Although not ideal, the mandate was to be implemented over the next 4 years with funding, and we were elated. I felt so proud to be part of it, especially when Senator Barefoot came out and said it was due to public pressure that they brought HB 90 to the floor and passed it. We all felt our relief, but soon found out that this was not to be the case. Many of us were still going to be reassigned, and personally, I was heartbroken. I felt like all the work I had done for my son and the school system didn't matter. And I did want to say, I've been part of Wake County Public Schools since 1976. As a 5-year-old who started at Lynn Road Elementary School right after it was built. And that's something I'm really proud of. My mom worked there. I went to West Millbrook Middle School. I went to Sanderson High School. And I had 2 teachers that absolutely changed my life at that school, Tracy Moore and Dana King, who I'm sure you know. I'm proud that my kids are part of Wake County Public School System. We did fall to the pressures of charter school for 1 year. My older son went to 2nd grade at a very highly rated charter school, and we hated it. We were so happy when Abbots Creek opened across the street. We were happy to say goodbye to that charter school, and I promise I will never stray from Wake County Public Schools again. My son has made a complete turnaround at this school. He was a very shy, stressed kid, and this year, in 2nd grade, he has become a very confident and happy student. So I'm here tonight to ask you to please support us in the way that we have supported you guys. Thank you.
Jamie Francis.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm Jamie Francis, and I also grew up as a Wake County student. I lived out in Knightdale, and I went to Lockhart Elementary and East Wake Middle and East Wake High School when Dr. Burns was there. So I'm here also to speak on behalf of my children, who I hope will be attending Abbots Creek. My daughter Allison is in 2nd grade right now, and she's been there for 3 years. And then my son Elliot is going to be attending kindergarten next year. So you will probably hear some of the things you've already heard, but I'm going to go ahead and read my prepared statement. I'm here to speak on behalf of the parents of 12 students who have been denied transfer requests to Abbots Creek Elementary. Soon after school started last year, parents of children at Abbots Creek who live on the south side of Durant Road were informed that our children would no longer be able to attend their school starting next year. To find out why, we attended the meetings offered by Wake County Public Schools about the new reassignment plan and started gathering information. We learned from student assignment that in our situation specifically, our children were being reassigned only due to the class size mandate, not for the 4 pillars, not new schools, not population changes or increases, or anything else, just the mandate. The parents were told this, and I know that many of the board believe this as well. So we formed a parent group and began to research and educate ourselves concerning the reassignment. We acquired the Abbots Creek building plans, current class counts, teacher counts, and determined that there was still room at Abbots Creek for our children. We presented this information to Glenn Carrozza, Kathy Moore, Principal Paula Trantham, Andre Smith, and Roxy Cash. Unfortunately, while there was enough space available, the problem became funding for teacher allotments if the mandate remained in place as it was. During those meetings, we were told point blank that if the mandate issue was fixed, our children would be staying at Abbots Creek. So we organized again. We wrote countless letters and emails to all of our North Carolina legislators, contacted the media, wrote blogs, did interviews, met with and called our district senators and representatives, participated in press conferences, marched and rallied, tweeted, Facebooked, formed and joined groups to communicate and increase awareness about the mandate across the state. For 5 months, we devoted every ounce of energy to put pressure on our elected officials to make sure they understood that the voting public would not support this mandate as written and that something had to be done about it. And hallelujah, they heard us. And we celebrated, not just for us, but because of the victory for North Carolina Public Schools and Wake County as well. Since then, we have been in further contact with the school and have been assured that there is room for our children at Abbots Creek. This evening, I'm asking if you could please vote to approve these transfers without delay. Many of our children have been at Abbots Creek since the school opened, and we live directly across the street, less than a mile from the school. We are part of the Abbots Creek community. We know that there is room in the school, and now the legislature has provided more funding and a 4-year phase into the mandate. The decision for our children to be denied transfer back to Abbots Creek is arbitrary. The data shows that our children can fit and still align with the plan for working towards the mandate. We have worked very hard to fight for our children, and we have remained respectful and patient. Please support our children the way that we have supported Wake County schools in the fight for more time and funding for the class size mandate. Please put an end to the emotional hardship that these parents and children have suffered for the last 6 months. Thank you.
That ends our closed session. We will, public comment. We will now move to our information item. Ms. Kathy Moore, K-3 class size.
Madam Chair and board members, as Ms. Moore is making her way up, I'd like to share a few thoughts about this. The legislation that requires a reduction of class size in grades K through 3 was amended by House Bill 90. Wake County Public School System has been working to address the change since back in the fall. At that time, principals were enlisted, staff members worked very diligently to assess the facility situation. With the change that occurred, it has been very clear that this is a complicated matter, especially in Wake County. It's complicated for many reasons, not the least of which is the growth that this district experiences. I want to share that starting with the principals last fall, there have been a lot of people involved in this. Throughout the process, principals, starting in the fall, as I said, and in early February, principals and area superintendents conducted an audit of each one of the elementary schools in the district to look at a schematic so that we could see how the space was originally designed and then compare that with how it's being used today. Good principals work hard to meet the needs of their program and their students, and so we have had some creative ways that facilities have been used, especially when they have been crowded. So we have audited that. We have confirmed that. Staff has gathered a great deal of data related not only to facilities, but also to funding and allotment, and also to staffing and recruitment. Following your work session last week, and I also thank you for your hard work, you have shared your appreciation for the difficult job the staff had of taking much data and putting it into a form that is easily understandable so that we could discuss it and get feedback from you. Following that, principals were once again brought in, and an area superintendent was brought in to help formulate what you were being presented with this evening. This is an information item this evening. We're not asking you to make a decision. However, what you're getting is the recommendation for the plan to implement the law so that Wake County Public Schools can follow the law beginning next year. And with that, I'll ask Ms. Moore to go through the presentation.
Chair Johnson, Hostler, Superintendent Burns, and board members, the information that I am bringing this evening will recap a little bit of the information and data that was shared in the work sessions, and then we'll head to the implementation plan that staff is recommending. You have the presentation. I'll go through it on the monitors as well, and then you have another item that's a document that is actually what we will bring forward as the plan and in the Prey-C on April 10th. Okay, here we go. So some of the information that we shared previously through the work session, we already have in the 17-18 school year, we are experiencing some space crunches based on the reduction that went down to 20 in K-3. 26 out of 113 schools already have multi-grade combination classrooms where you have a 1-2 or a 2-3, that kind of thing, in one room. 11 out of 113 schools are already using what's called a doubling up scenario with 2 teachers in one classroom with a number of students that is greater than 1 teacher can serve. 35 out of 113 schools have already converted storage rooms, conference rooms, staff offices, and others to create 81 additional classrooms. So we have 81 classrooms that have been created in our schools out of spaces that were not intended to be classrooms. Based on the future K-3 class size standards and the data that you will see here reflects the implementation of the law at its conclusion over the space of 4 years. So this implementation will occur over the space of the next 4 years. 438 additional classrooms will be needed. 86 out of 113 elementary schools will exceed 100% utilization without trailers. 58 out of those 113 will exceed 100% utilization with the trailers. And 15 out of 113 elementary schools do have 40 classrooms available now for future growth, meaning that we do have some elementary schools that do have classrooms available. All of these numbers reflect our projected population enrollment for next year. It does not include the growth that will naturally occur over the next 4 years.
Ms. Moore, before you proceed, if I could make one note regarding the 438 additional classrooms. As Ms. Moore shared, this is based on full implementation of the law using next year's projected student enrollment. Given the projected growth 4 years out, it is fair to say that 438 additional classrooms would be a conservative estimate of the additional classroom space needed. You will be building new schools to accommodate growth. However, because of the change in the class size, 438 would be a conservative estimate going forward.
Okay. So just an overview of the implementation plan, the major points. We're going to outline the immediate options in terms of things that we know we need to implement for the next school year in 18-19. We're going to consider some intermediate options that may take a little bit longer, and then longer term options that will require additional development and planning. And we are going to include a process that provides board members with some reports, updates around ongoing impacts so that we can track this as we move forward. It is important to note, due to the unique academic and facility needs at each school, we're not necessarily recommending a uniform solution. We will be prioritizing and putting some things in a certain order, but each school is unique and different and will need to be, that will need to be considered in the process. There is broad consensus, and we heard this from the board at the work session last week, and we've heard it from schools as well, that we want to protect spaces that are currently used to provide arts and magnet education programming. So you will see that consensus reflected in the order that we present options for finding additional spaces. Principal discretion will be necessary when following these implementation plan guidelines. So starting with facilities, immediate options, and this is in the order that we have listed them in terms of how principals should consider additional spaces. First, any vacant or unused classrooms. If you have space in your building, classrooms, trailers that are not currently being used, that are classrooms, obviously you would go there first. Other reflects existing classrooms in a school, but they have been repurposed for other uses. So you may have been in a situation in a school where you had additional classrooms and you didn't need them at the time, so you've repurposed them for other uses. Those would need to come next and go back to their original purpose of a classroom. And then we are looking at computer labs, collaborative space. You'll note that, as we discussed last week, the computer labs in many of our schools have started going the way of, actually a lot of them have been converted to collaborative space. And the 3-to-1 rollout for devices for each teacher to have in the classroom has sort of supported the ability to move away from a lab scenario the way that we used to have. And then we think that principals should now consider assigning 2 teachers of record to 1 classroom when the size of the class exceeds statutory limits. So this is the point in the scenario where a principal would begin to consider the doubling up scenario. Then next, principals could go to classrooms that have been designated as science classrooms or general ed. These are classrooms that support LEP, AIG, or intervention type classroom spaces, as well as cross-categorical resource classrooms. And those could be done in any order. There are a number of classrooms in that mix, and you got some data last week that shows that in some cases, schools are already using some of these spaces to create additional classroom spaces. Prior to using all of the science, general ed, and cross-categorical classrooms that are available, we would ask that the principal touch base with the area superintendent just to sort of do a progress check at this point in terms of, is that your best choice? And then if once we're past that, to again consider furthering, increasing, or now using 2 teachers of record when the size of the class exceeds statutory limits. And if the answer is still no at this point, the last option would be to look at art, music, or magnet classrooms. In this particular case, if a school gets to the point of needing to take art, music, or magnet, and that is the school's recommendation, we do want to establish a process that would require review by the area superintendent and a decision to be made at that point, given the board and the school's desire to maintain those classrooms intact for those purposes. So that would be the order of operations, so to speak, there. Some short-term options that would not be immediate, but could be implemented within about 12 months or so. Some solutions may require a facility modification, things like electrical options or fire code requirements, strobes, those kinds of things that may need to go into classroom, outfitting it to support technology if it's a space that's not been outfitted to do that previously. Those could be done in a fairly quick amount of time, but would take a little bit longer than taking existing spaces that are prepped. We could look at capping schools outside of the normal board policy timeline. This would require a waiver of board policy. We did that this year in the fall when we went ahead and capped some schools in preparation for what we knew was going to be issues with meeting the class size mandate, and we had to waive board policy at that time in order to do that. And then we're also looking at needing to make track assignment changes in our multi-track year-round schools. And here, you really need to maximize the seats on each track in order to achieve the efficiencies and be able to fully utilize the allotments that you get. Sometimes, as you know, we have some inefficiencies in track assignments due to siblings in other schools and schools that are smaller or larger, the extent to which parental preferences are able to be accommodated, so there may be some need to look at track changes as we move forward. A longer-term options, these are things that would require probably more than 12 months to accomplish. Things like either moving or bringing moving temporary classrooms, mobile units onto sites where there is space, and that is an option. Capping according to board policy, you know that normally capping occurs around the same time as the enrollment plan is passed, shortly thereafter, a full year prior to the school year well, not a full year, but in the school year prior to when the capping will actually take place. Redistricting using the enrollment plan to look at base attendance areas in order to balance populations in schools where there is a need. And something that we did not talk about last week, but we did mention back in the fall, is there's always a possibility of looking at currently traditional calendar schools and converting those to multi-track year-round calendar schools in order to achieve a greater capacity. I should mention that some of these are also long-term because they do require some community input and opportunity to really work with families on some of these changes. It's not just about the tactical piece, but also the community piece. Some very long-term options here. Additions or renovations specifically to address K-3 capacity. And then the next one, revising grade configurations to create K-2 schools, 3-5 schools, or 5-8 schools. We may have touched on this briefly in the fall. We have some elementary schools that are a single story that may be suited to be converted to K-2 schools because that helps us with the egress issues that we have with K-1 in multi-story schools where you can't move kindergarteners or first graders to upper floors because of the egress requirements. And then we have some schools that are multi-story that could become 3-5 schools or K-5 schools. Actually, they could be either. We also talked about schools, middle schools that may have space to become 5th through 8th grade schools as an option in order to get 5th graders out of a building and create more spaces in an elementary school to implement the K-3 legislation. And then obviously much longer term would be new schools construction. This one is pretty far out unless you rearrange some priorities based on what's currently in the books and land that is banked and that sort of thing. But obviously these take a little bit longer to accomplish. Some other considerations in the plan. We discussed with the board last week, did you want to do a 3-year implementation with a hold harmless 1 year or do a phased 4-year implementation? And there was broad consensus from the board as well as the principals when we met that a 4-year implementation was the way to go. And I think one of the board members used a term during the meeting that if you didn't, it would be like a balloon payment, which is sort of accurate. Because when you looked at the funding scenarios, the cost, you may have savings 1 year, a cost another year, and a big cost in year 4. And by spreading it out over 4 years, you had a more predictable cost and a lower amount over 4 years spread out. We will look at maintaining the current conversion restriction that exists in elementary school. The law will eventually fully require that all positions that are given by the state are used only for the purposes for which they are intended. We have already started doing that with our elementary schools. And while there may exist some flexibility to back off of that, to then turn around and just do it back again a year or 2 later, we feel we should just stay the course so that we are using positions and the resources from the state as they are intended. Regarding staffing and recruitment, that was another impact that we looked at. We are looking at increasing our human resources outreach as needed in order to meet the need for what is anticipated to be an additional 102 elementary school teachers each of the next 4 years. So about 102 teachers every year, each of the next 4 years. We will continue to use early contracts for our high needs areas and if needed for the elementary positions as well, if we find that we're not getting the number of applicants and we're concerned about that. We are going to reestablish the WCPSS teacher job fair, which had taken a brief hiatus. We had participated in a regional job fair last year, and we will continue to participate in regional job fairs, but we are large enough and have a need in, every year with the number of teachers that we hire, and that increasing with the K-3 legislation that we feel it's appropriate to have our own job fair as well. We mentioned a reporting process to the board that will start sometime probably before the end of this school year. The report that we provide the board will be triggered by a class size overage. So when a class size goes over the limit, there is a process where that gets reported through the principal to the area superintendent, and then we look at what is the solution. An additional position that can be given to the school at whatever time of year that overage occurs. And what we will do is provide information to the board on what school we're talking about, what grade level we're talking about, how the overage will be or has been addressed, because depending on the timing, we may be allocating an additional position to the school for the remainder of the school year, but it may not yet have been hired by the time we report to the board. So you'll have all of that information. We are also planning to include what the facility impact is going to be of the overage when it is as part of the report, and the months of employment that are required, so that we can track the impact over the course of the next 4 years of the legislation and better plan as we move forward year over year. Any questions? As Dr. Burns mentioned, this is an information item this evening. You have a separate attachment that contains most of the information from the presentation in a document format that will form the basis of a précis and an implementation plan for April 10th.
Ms. Cash.
So one thing I'm missing in here that maybe I'm not disappointed because maybe I'm just not seeing it. We have vacant seats in some of our magnets. We have vacant seats in some of our year-round. I don't see a targeted marketing strategy to bring kids into those seats for those schools.
So I think that's always a part of the magnet recruitment process, but to double down or make an additional effort makes complete sense.
Ms. Kushner.
Thank you. And I know there's a lot, but it might be asking a question that's already been asked, but can you remind us of what state changes in HB 90? It's still going to be implemented over 4 years, but can you remind us of what is the actual funding that the state has so far provided that we know is happening?
So this is anticipated. The state has allocated around $61 million towards this for the next school year. And generally, Wake County Public School Systems ends up being about 10 to 11% of the state funding when it's allocated on a per pupil basis. So we anticipate a little bit over $6 million being the amount that the county will get. Now, in order to implement the 102 positions, with benefits and everything else, it'll actually cost us a little bit more than what the state is allocating for the enhancement positions. So there will be a local cost, even though the state is providing us some funding. That's why you get a cost every year for the implementation, because the amount of funding that we anticipate will be provided over the 4 years will not meet the current level of service that we are providing.
It's anticipated funding. We're not going to know that till the state has its budget.
Well, I think that,
before.
We've got,
Ms. Kushner, I believe the funding source has been identified.
I think so too.
And the cost at the end of the 4 years is projected to be about $9 million to address supplement and benefits for the roughly 400 additional teachers that the legislation provides. So the local cost to Wake County Public Schools will be about $9 million for that part.
Well, I think we just need to clarify that a little bit. That local cost is the salary supplement local. It costs about $67 million to hire 100 teachers, 113 teachers, which is one teacher per elementary school. That 102 is for year one. We need another 102 for year two. That's not funded at all by the legislature. So to get those teachers, Dr. Burns, am I not mistaken, that would require an additional $7 million. Then the year three, another $7 million. Year four, another $7 million. So the $9 million, I think, is a conservative estimate, is it not?
Dr. Martin, if I'm not mistaken, the legislation provides for funding each of the 4 years from the state for the additional enhancement teachers.
So $61 million added each year? I think it was just a one-time. The 61 becomes recurring.
Yes.
But I don't think
Correct.
it becomes 61, then 122, and so on.
I believe it does, because the intention of the legislation is to fund one teacher for every 100 for 191 kids. And that goes up each year.
Correct. It goes up to 50% of the total funds at the 1 to 191 ratio for 1920, and then goes up to there. So when you're in 21-22, it's 100% of the total funds required for the 1 to 191 ratio. But that still doesn't include your local supplements.
Yeah. So the complication is that the 1 to 191, we get a fourth of that.
Right.
First year. Then we get half of it the second year.
Then 100%.
Three-quarters the third year, and then full fourth year.
Ms. Kushner, the other parts of House Bill 90, you may be aware, in addition to the additional, they call them enhancement teachers. There's another term that's been used in the district for enhancement teachers. They're different. We have to change that terminology. The phase-in allows next year's implementation to be the same as this year's, and then there are 3 years to get to full implementation 4 years from now. And that was a good bit of the discussion with the board members as to how this might be implemented. If you wait a year, that's when you get that balloon payment at the end of roughly $11 million. And so looking at that, it seemed clear the boards indicated to us that breaking that up over 4 years would be preferable so that we can, as Ms. Moore said, predict the cost. The other issue is that there is no funding provided for facilities still, and flexibility has been severely impacted, such that by the end of the implementation, the positions in classroom teacher cannot be transferred out except for a visiting international faculty teaching position. The enhancement teaching positions can only be transferred into classroom teacher. The reason that's important in Wake County is that through your flexibility with conversions, you have been able to have the most expensive teachers in your district paid for by the state and the least expensive paid for through local. That practice will no longer be available to you. And so there's a cost there that we really can't grab all of it. We tried to address that to some degree, but that is something you're going to have to live for a while to see what that impact truly is.
And I do think it's important to underscore that point particularly because that has been something Wake County's been able to leverage to maximize more state funding, given that where we are as a per pupil in state funding. So thank you for
Yes, and again,
that.
I would say that is a cost that is in the legislation, and it is probably Wake County specific, but it's still a Wake County cost. And to maintain programs and services as you have in the past will require additional local funds in order to do so as a result of this change in the law.
Thank you. Both, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll now entertain a motion for consent items.
Move that we approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion carries. We will now move to action items. First, facilities, construction documents, East Wake Middle School.
Chair, board members, good afternoon, or good evening. Yes. Tonight, got with you the construction documents for East Wake Middle. Staff has reviewed the construction documents and requests board approval and authorization to advertise for the construction of East Wake Middle School. This project was reviewed at the March 12 Facilities Committee meeting and recommended to come to this board meeting tonight. East Wake Middle is scheduled to open in 2021 school year. Board approval requested.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Fletcher.
I'd like to move approval of this recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Fletcher.
If I may, we heard in our public comment tonight differing points of view, one of which remarked about a 2007 evaluation that was part of our public record on how we evaluate our buildings. The assessment was actually done in 2006 to show that this school was showing some inappropriate wear and we needed to look at a future project, whether it was renovation or replacement hadn't been determined at that time. In 2008, an additional evaluation was done, and if you remember 2008, we had an economic downturn, and the prospects of the county floating a bond at that time were postponed, and therefore no additional action was taken on the confirmed assessment of the building needs. When it came back in 2013 and we had a recovering economy and working with the county commission to put together a bond referendum for the community, the replacement or the renovation or replacement of East Wake Middle School made it onto the list. It did not make it onto the list for, if I'm correct me, Mr. Desiremore, if I'm wrong, a decision was ultimately made to put it through design, but construction funding was not made available in the 2013 general obligation bond package to the public. But its design was in there. So now that we're on a slightly different construction program with the county, we have a 7-year rolling project. That 7-year plan brought forward construction funding for East Wake Middle School. The staff was charged with comparing renovation, or with looking at renovation, which we do regularly. We did that assessment at Apex High School, for example, and came back with significant issues with the building we thought we could save. And an ultimate decision was made that campus needed to go to the ground and come back up fresh. Staff did that same kind of assessment with East Wake Middle and presented to us 2 options, a renovation option and a new construction option. Something I learned, I didn't know prior to this, that school's actually on a septic system, which seems curious given where we are in Wake County right now. But I would also like to say that the difference in a building that was built 28 years ago and what we're building today to support our academic program is a stark difference in terms of housing. I will say it's functional obsolescence. What we have today is a very different academic environment, facility environment for students to learn and be engaged in than what we had 28 years ago, which is rows of chairs, a teacher in the front of the classroom, and that's the way everything was. We have a very different situation today. The 30-year-old house in Wake County's got a living room, a dining room, a den, maybe a breakfast room and a kitchen. And today, the modern architecture would say that's an open floor. You take out those walls, you figure out how to make it an open floor plan, so you've got greater flexibility of space. And that's not an exact analogy to what our new schools are, but it's close enough to say that the space flexibility in our new school designs is sufficient. I will say this also, having served on the board in over the last two and a half decades.
He's looking to you, Roger.
Yeah, 93 to 2005 and came back in 2013. This board has made every effort possible to be conservative and to make sure that we treated all parts of the county fairly when we look at projects. That in large part is why this project's on the table instead of a West Millbrook Middle School, for example. It also has to do with the scheduling of and the opportunity to have what we call swing space. How would we safely do renovation at this school? And the idea was we would have to put a modular campus on this site, or we'd have to use Riverbend Middle School. Well, Riverbend Middle School is now occupied with its own students. It's no longer available to be used as swing space while students, so doing the renovations while students are on campus creates all kinds of additional hazards and costs and delays in construction. So I'm firmly in support of the staff recommendation. I believe the school community is excited about the opportunity to have a modern, functional facility to help their academic program continue to improve and to support a growing community in Eastern Wake County. And I would urge my colleagues to support it as well.
Mr. Agee.
Yes, I got several questions about this. The submitted feasibility analysis states that the school is not centrally located. Most students would be bused from other areas. Why are additional seats in this location being planned, given that evaluation?
Well, the siting, if you look at the base assignment area that is assigned to here, is the school is located right on the eastern edge of the entire base. The entire base is located off to the east of the school. It's on the western edge of that. So when on that feasibility study, that's what that is talking about. It's located on the very opposite, just on the edge of the base assignment area.
Well, in that feasibility study, that's a DPI document. You gave that a score of 0 for that reason. That's why the question there. So
that applies also to just the site part. That feasibility study is broken up into 2 parts, the building and the site. That
Correct.
particular part is on the site part. It's the building part that does most of the driving when you take a look at their requirements on whether to consider demolition of the site or not.
all right. Was a roofing consultant contracted to evaluate the roofing?
We usually, in most cases, we do. I would imagine we had it on this one too.
Well, that is the procedure for new schools. In all the documentation, I didn't see a registered roof consultant listed. The architect was listed, the engineers were listed, and it didn't have the content that you would usually receive from one of those consultants. The cost provided for the roof replacement seems to include complete replacement of the roof. Is that the case?
I don't know exactly. I'd tell you that we brought on board reputable architects and engineers to evaluate the entire school. They took a look at all the different options that they had available, and their recommendation based on their experience and the future layout of the school ends up with the result.
All right. So the facility, it has a combination of a standing seam metal roof and a single ply membrane roof. Metal roofing is typically expected to last 40 to 70 years, often with even a 40-year paint warranty. Some people call it a lifetime roof. The metal roofing covers about 90% of the area. The remaining is the single-ply roofing. Why was replacing only the single-ply roofing not considered?
The important part, the key part of each one of our projects is that when we bring our architects on board and our design team on board, they look at the total school project. They do a complete look at the entire buildings, all the issues involved. They take a look at the program that is in place and whether what program needs to be in place. They look at the site, and they take all of that and make a master plan and come up with an overall plan. Some of those items, if you take them one by one, may not seem to be important, may not seem to be necessary to replace, but when you take a look at the entire project from a whole school perspective, it becomes clear that what needs to be done is to tear down the entire school and rebuild from start.
Well, that didn't seem to address the roofing questions. So many of the photos that were in the presentation show the staining of the mason area adjacent to the downspout locations, and so this indicates that the rooftop drainage areas were allowed to become clogged. Why did this condition go on so long, and if we had evaluations back almost 8 years ago, it doesn't look like they were addressed?
Well, if you look at some of the pictures, the roofing up there, the drainage is actually almost like an open trough type of drainage. It'd be very difficult, actually, for those to become clogged because they're wide troughs, and they would just overflow off the top of the roof.
On the building envelope issue, one of the interior photos show openings at a single roof joist location, but the rest of the perimeter appears to be sealed. Why was correcting this limited condition not considered instead of a completely new building skin?
I'm not sure how you determined it was just the one location. My understanding is that problem was prevalent throughout the building.
Possibly at the roof joist locations, but the rest of the perimeter looked okay. All right, well, in this plan, in the renovation plan, it calls for new building skin, new roof, new thermal insulation, and air barrier. This is exaggerated, inflated, unneeded claim. I can see from that same photo a dry ceiling cavity with no sign of rusting on any of the steel, an intact roof deck with no sign of moisture damage. To me, this is clear indicators of an intact roofing system. Replacement of the entire roofing system doesn't appear to be warranted by any of the photos I've seen. Then the statements of the poorly functioning thermal insulation system, that lacked any supporting evidence, including any energy consumption histories, any thermal imaging, or bore score investigations. Why was none of that type work performed to evaluate those conditions?
If you go back and look at the last 5 years, and I think you asked about comparing it to Mills Park Middle School. If you compare it to Mills Park Middle School, the energy usage per square foot for this school is 20% higher than it is at Mills Park Middle School.
Would have been nice to have seen that turned in. The site drainage was listed as a troubling issue with two possible causes. First, undersized drain systems, and the second, those systems being clogged. Have the drainage systems been investigated for clogging? Have the sizes been evaluated?
Again, the drainage on the roof line and everything was an open trough. There wasn't really a size for that.
This is
you're looking
site
at,
drainage.
you're talking about the site drainage. Yes, if there was clogging, the staff went out there to check the site. And speaking of that, if you look back at the past 3 years and you take a look at the labor, the materials, and the contracts cost at East Wake Middle School, those costs have averaged 46% more than the district average for middle schools throughout the district.
The plan also calls for complete replacement of the electrical distribution equipment. Electrical equipment is typically evaluated by looking for corrosion, evidence of overheating, and by testing. No information of that type was presented. Why did we not evaluate it more than was apparent in the presentations?
Again, we've had well-respected engineers and architects on board with this design team. They've done multiple projects for us. Their jobs have all been successful. There's no reason to doubt their analysis for this design.
All right. The existing heating and cooling system is a water source heat pump system. This is known to be the most efficient system for a school building. The presented plan completely changes to a substantially different type system when all other similar school projects, only the individual heat pump units are replaced. Why was the most expensive possibility chosen here?
It's not considered the most expensive. It's considered probably the best choice. After looking at DPI guidance and other experience with our mechanical engineers, DPI now recommends that a hot water, chill water system with 4 pipes is the recommended system to use.
So the selected HVAC system would require building new spaces in the existing building to house all this equipment. an additional cost, how many square feet of educational space is lost in that plan?
There wouldn't be any educational space loss. You would still be building the space to standard.
In the renovated parts of the building, you was going to put all new mechanical equipment. It wouldn't fit in the previous spots.
There were, but I believe all the options showed additional classrooms being added.
Well, the submitted plan also included the addition of a wet pipe sprinkler system. For the size and type of construction of the existing building, this is not a requirement. Why would this be added to the existing building?
I would turn back to the engineers and ask them. That's not really available for me right now.
The gym has had some work done in the recent past, roof insulation, possibly some roofing. Can you tell us the cost and age of that work?
No, I do not have that information available. Again, though, when the team looked at the entire thing, they looked at all the facilities and made an evaluation based on what they saw and knowing what the current condition of those facilities are.
Well, I'll wrap up here. Everything I've looked at in the presentations about the renovation, it just looks misleading. Facility feasibility analysis looks exaggerated and not really a good faith examination. I just cannot agree with anything here.
Mr. Sutton.
I appreciate Mr. AG's thorough examination of the renovation specifications and that sort of thing. I actually met him out there one day, and he and I took a walk around the building and pretty much covered generally every square inch, from the exterior of East Wake Middle to the gymnasium, the cafeteria, classrooms. I know I am nowhere near as well versed as Mr. AG is in construction and facilities management, and there were some parts of the facility and the property that years ago, and I think one of the speakers spoke about some of the things that should have been considered or corrected years ago. Clearly, there are some flaws, both I think in the planning of the initial construction and over the years that, again, should have been considered or corrected or were not. I don't know that this is the time to debate how well the school was maintained. Clearly, there were, over the years, perhaps some lapses in good maintenance of the building. But there were a number of things that struck me during that visit. Mr. Fletcher touched on one, and that's that the facility sits on its own septic system and well system. And we have now, 181?
83 schools.
183 schools. And it is the only school in our system that sits on a septic system, which was, to me, walking around that campus as a board member was almost an embarrassment to me. They have an alarm system in the office that when the sewer system backs up, an alarm or beep goes off in the office. It then alerts the folks at the sewage pump place where we're contracted with to come out and literally pump the system. That's probably because it has a bathroom that most of the bathrooms only have 2 to 3 stalls at best. So it has inadequate bathroom facilities given the number of students that are there. I don't know how you might replace a septic system, or if you build a new building, or how you take it off a septic system and now hook it up to a new system, because it does have running water and sewer there now, but at that time when the building was constructed, it didn't. You know, if you walk up to the building and you look at the outside of it, concrete walls, the roof, the structure, it looks like one that we could salvage or use in some way. But the HVA system is poor. The gym looks like a throwback from the 60s or something. It literally has plastic that's blown up in the top just to keep asbestos and insulation from falling down on the floor. I could go on and on with a list of the things that we saw that every time every time there's rain, the walkway floods. Students, most of the walkways are not covered, so as students go from building to building, they're walking in the rain. There are several places of the campus that flood every time it rains because of poor drainage issues around the campus. The cafeteria is inadequate. I mean, again, I can go on and on. Mr. Jones, it would have been nice if we could have had you there back years ago and helped us do some of the renovations, but I don't know that there's any part of it that is worth salvaging or saving at this point, especially with the septic system. And if you have some ideas on how we might be able to do that and save some money, we'd love to hear them, but I don't see how that's physically possible for this structure at this point, given in its life cycle. And I have to be honest, if as a board member and a parent of a child in Wake County, I would not in good conscience send my child, quite frankly, probably shouldn't say it, but I will. I wouldn't feel comfortable sending my child to this school. I don't believe that any student in Wake County should attend this school now or in the future, given its current state. And so I think it does need to be torn down and renovated, and we build another school on that campus. I think, quite frankly, we probably owe an apology to the students and the staff that currently attend work and school there because they don't deserve a facility of that poor quality. And lastly, I'll say that I applaud them every day for having to be there and enduring the conditions that they have to endure on a daily basis. Anyone that, including some of our speakers that disagree, I invite you, take a look at the school, go out and visit, schedule a time with the principal, the administration. I'm sure they would love to show you some of the challenges that they deal with on a everyday basis. So with that, I'll stop.
Ms. Cash.
I'm struggling with this one because I think of everything that Mr. Sutton said. I was having trouble with understanding why the renovation was as expensive as it was compared to the building of the new school, and I'm still struggling with why that cost of renovating is so high. But I've been out visiting a lot of schools in my district and talking to a lot of PTAs and principals, and this is a symptom of something bigger we have in Wake County. Our maintenance of our schools we're letting them go. We're just letting our schools go, and we are going to be paying big dollars later by letting our schools go like we're doing. And there are things that are being brought in, and I know we've got limited dollars. I know we have workforce issues, I'm sure, but there are things that are being brought up to the maintenance department that have become more small to start with and now bigger over the next 2 or 3 years. And this is just an example of something we could have done maybe more to take care of longer. And I don't want to continue that trend. That's why I'm torn on this, because at some point we need to make a stand. And I do appreciate, Mr. Agee, that you are bringing up the issues of things that we are paying more for later that we could fix earlier. So I'm struggling with this because I don't think we're maintaining our schools. And we need to deal with that. You know, I've been pretty open about our building program and things like that are bothering me, and our renovations being pushed down more than just West Millbrook, Mr. Fletcher. It's other schools that are being pushed down and down and down the list. And building schools in areas that do not need to be built on that site because they're emptying a school across the road from it, and that's happening at 4 schools in my district. And this is a school that's going to have extra capacity that I don't know how we're going to get kids in there. We're going from what should have been a year-round school, track 4, to a modified calendar because it couldn't attract. So now I want us to talk about these things as a full board. We're having empty seats. We're having maintenance problems, and we just keep building new schools. So we've got to talk about that as a board.
Ms. Mahaffey.
I remember sitting in, I believe it was a work session or facilities, where we heard from the head of our maintenance department saying we're not able to offer a competitive wage, so we are losing folks. And so, again, I want to implore us to look at that. I know last year in our budget, we asked for our employees to get a living wage. I do think we need to look at our maintenance schedule. I think workforce is part of that. Mr. Desiremore, what is the time frame? Because Riverbend Middle School is no longer an option for a swing space. Should a renovation of East Wake happen, what is the time frame? How long is that expected to take?
You'd be looking at probably 2 to 3 year delay.
A 2 to 3 year delay. And that would be having students in the building, either in the existing building or on a modulars
campus
as that happens. And then for a new build, about how long would construction be?
We're looking at it opening in 2021, and we're looking at bidding it the next month or so.
Okay. And so, but the students would not be impacted or having to move throughout
Right.
the building or in and out of
They will be-
modulars during that time.
That is correct.
So it would be less impact to the current academic program.
Correct.
Madam Chair, I'd like to offer, and I think we heard this a couple times, and I know, I believe Mr. Agee has said it in the past, a friendly amendment that we look into renaming the school if we are to build a new building.
That's a, yeah.
A friendly motion
Yeah.
to amend, yes.
Yes.
A friendly amendment.
To Mr. Fletcher.
Comment that I would make, I know you guys have decided it's a second, so on and so forth, is you do have a school naming
Process
Right.
that I would actually.
To look at it in committee. Shouldn't be done here? Well, yeah, well, to send that, but as part of it.
So can I make a friendly
Yes.
recommendation? Sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Fletcher. Yes, is that we follow through with this motion, and then what you could do is, like all of us, you could ask the chair, Mr. Fletcher, to add this to his agenda.
I will. Thank you.
Mr. Fletcher. Thank you. Ms. Mahaffey.
I do believe last year, our maintenance and operation people requested 1 additional technician in the operating budget that was not funded. And that was a modest request from Mr. Clark and his organization because he had been a team player and pared down his request in order to support the academic program. We made a decision last year to take our janitorial services from 3 days a week to, what is it? 4 days, well, to less frequent.
Every other. We added a day
To less
every other
frequent.
week.
Every other day, every other week.
In years past, I've heard comparisons of, and I'm not casting aspersions by saying this, where the Wake County spends somewhere north of $2 per square foot on the maintenance of their buildings. Wake County Public Schools has been scrimping by with about $1.20 per square foot. Lower, all right? How low, Joe?
Mr. Fletcher, in 2001, we were spending 88 cents per square foot. That was about 1% of the replacement value of our buildings.
Okay, and
today, we are spending 89 cents a square foot, and it's about 0.5% of our replacement value.
So the issue of ongoing maintenance for our buildings is a chronic one. that is a result of inadequate funding to keep the structures in place. What is the recommendation? 2%?
Yes, sir.
So 2% of replacement value should be in our maintenance and operation budget. It's not. And since the county is responsible for all the facilities, it becomes a local funding issue. It is not a state issue. We can't point to them. So there's another challenge for us in terms of local funding and having local taxpayers support the maintenance of the schools they've paid for. So that's a challenge.
Point of order. Well, I certainly appreciate, Mr. Fletcher, your comments. I think we're being unfair to staff at this point as we're getting into a discussion about maintenance and facilities and the availability of funds and where that funding should come from. The précis in the item here is quite clear, where we are either approving or not approving the project budget to construct East Wake Middle School, tearing that down and building another school. Again, I appreciate the conversation about maintenance. I think that is one that needs to be had. Both, I agree with you and Ms. Cash and Mr. Agee. We definitely need to do a better job of maintaining our facilities. But I think we ought to stay focused on sort of what is the task at hand and what's on our agenda for tonight. It's not the naming of the school. It's not rather we maintain our facilities adequately or not, but what is on the agenda is approving the schedule for East Wake Middle School. So I would say that we need to just focus on that at this time.
And Mr. Sutton, to that point, I will reiterate, I have a sticky over here to myself about, and this goes back to, I think you started this conversation, Ms. Cash, is the need for us to have philosophical conversations. We've said it about assignment, we've said it now about suspension and our student achievement, and now we're saying about maintenance and operations. And I do believe that it's important for us to continue to note that we can point to every point in time because we have a wonderful historical knowledge, specifically on this side of the table, over 2 decades of being able to recall, and I think that's important. But I also think those points in time is why we're talking about systemic issues today. And to Mr. Sutton's point, unfortunately, just like when we talked about assignment and student achievement data, we have to make a decision in lieu of, unfortunately, unless the board, and what the board can do is vote this down and deal with it later. But again, I will remind you that all of this has gone through the process, and so let's stick to the process, which means we're going to vote on what's in front of us, but that does not preclude us from having another work session for when we talk about these philosophical beliefs, because I do believe that this year, this is the first time I've had a list of stickies that require us to talk philosophically, but I want to take us back, Mr. Fletcher. I'm thinking you're going to keep us on task.
Well, I will do that and respect the wishes of the board greatly. I would offer a slight difference in the language that Mr. Sutton just used. It is to build a new school, and when it's open, to demolish the existing building.
One thing at a time. That's right.
To build a new school.
Right. And thank you.
Call for the question. Yes, sir.
If I could interject on that, so under your procedures, if there's a motion to call for the question, just that's not in order unless everybody's had an opportunity to speak. So if anybody else wants to speak, I think most board members have spoken. But if anybody else wants to speak that hasn't spoken, they should have that opportunity now. Other than that, we would go with a second on the call for question, vote on that, and then vote on the underlying motion.
Okay. Dr. Morton.
I did want to make one comment. There's been a lot said about not appropriately evaluating facilities or facilities construction, and I've been on the facilities committee, I think ever since I've been on the board, and we've had this kind of conversation. Every time we get a building that we're frustrated that we have to tear down because it was built not that long ago. We've had that discussion. We continue to have that discussion, and that's why we changed the philosophy particularly under Mr. Fletcher's leadership and the chairing of that committee, to make sure we're looking at life cycle costing as we build buildings. So I think we are addressing these kind of issues moving forward, but we cannot hold an existing school hostage for not having had those life cycle conversations when it was built. I think we're doing a much better job of that right now. I think it's a mischaracterization to say we're not doing that. We are doing that work, but let's not hold a building hostage that was not part of a long-term planning process. And so I will enthusiastically vote for this renovation or new building.
Everyone that has a desire to speak has their... So we actually have a call for the question on the floor. And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we will now vote on the call for the question. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, so now we will actually take the official vote on what's indicated on the précis as Mr. Fletcher just Mr. Fletcher, Mr. Sutton just reiterated. So all in favor, please note by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Okay. We have a majority of them. Yes, it is. The motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Desiremore. Transportation. Waiver of policy for bill schedule.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Superintendent Burns. At your work session this afternoon, staff reviewed our recommended 2018-2019 bell schedules. Changes to the schedules for next year from the current year include setting times for the 4 new schools that will be opening next year, and all 4 of those times align with our standard for elementary, middle, and high, and changing 1 current school schedule to meet the needs of their being relocated to a swing space. Board Policy 3300 requires the board to approve bell schedules prior to April 1st of the year preceding the school year. Because today is the first time we brought these recommended schedules to you, we are requesting that the board waive Policy 3300 such that you can provide any feedback to us for changes, if there are any, and then we can bring a final recommendation to you at your April 10th meeting and ask for action at that point. So with that, I will ask consideration of the board waiving the provision within Policy 3300 requiring approval prior to April 1st.
Move to waive board policy 3300.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Nieder.
Thank you.
Yes, just the waiver. We did not approve. We have not approved a bill schedule.
I'm just saying.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, was due April 1st. Sorry, Ms. Cash. We did have this presentation at work session. My apologies for not walking through it again. Yes, board policy 3300 school calendar. Oh, no, sorry. You're right, Mr. Smith. Registered sex offenders first reading.
Thank you. Chair Johnson Hostler, board members, and Superintendent Burns. I bring to you for first reading Board Policy 4260 and 5022. This policy is being presented as part of the Policy Migration Project. It was reviewed at the February 5th AAT meeting and approved at the February 27th Policy Committee meeting. When given final board approval, this policy will replace Policy 2334, also entitled Registered Sex Offenders. Staff is requesting board approval.
On behalf of the Policy Committee, I'd like to move approval of this policy, and noting that it is 2 policies, but wrapped in one. That's why 2 policy numbers.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Next, Board Policy 4270-6145.
Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Burns. I'm here to present to you Policy 4270 for first reading that focuses on concussions and head injuries. This policy was first brought forth to our policy committee on February 27, 2018, and outlines our concussion safety requirements set forth by the State Board of Education. If you have any questions at this time, staff is recommending approval. I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
I'd like to move approval of this policy, and it also is a dual-numbered policy, so both numbers 4270, 6145, and I move that we approve this modified policy.
Second.
We have a motion.
New policy.
Yes, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So I'll just note one point. I think a very important part of this policy is that we have included a reporting requirement. And so every year, the board will receive a report on concussions, and that way we can keep track of what's going on. I think that's an important addition to this policy.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd also like to note, I like the fact that we've added resources to this policy so that when parents are looking at it, they can actually get some additional information as well. I think that's a good thing to do.
Great.
No further discussion. All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Board Policy 4705-7825, confidentiality personnel identified. Who's coming? Mr. Nieder.
Thank you. Policy 4705-7825 is being presented as part of the migration that the board is going through. It was reviewed at the February 19th AAT meeting and approved at the February 27th Policy Committee meeting. When given final approval, this policy will replace Policy 2315, collection, use, and release of Social Security numbers and other personal identifying information. Staff is requesting board approval.
On behalf of the Policy Committee, I'd like to recommend approval of the revised 4705-7825 policy.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Board Policy 5040. And Mr. Simmons, you will be following right after with Board Policy 5050.
Good evening, and thank you. Board Policy 5040, News Media Relations, was presented 219 to the committee, 227 to the committee, and replaces Board Policy 2513. Staff is requesting board approval.
On behalf of the Policy Committee, I recommend approval of this revised policy.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion carries.
And Policy 5050, the last in this list, is also part of the Policy Migration Progress Project, reviewed 219 by the Academic Advancement Team, 227 by the Policy Committee. Inclement weather procedures is the policy. It replaces 2311, which we hope not to use anytime soon.
Like tomorrow.
Staff is requesting board approval.
Yes.
Again, on behalf of the Policy Committee, I recommend approval of this revised policy.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Thank you. A motion to go into closed session.
Madam Chair, I move to consider, move that we go into closed session to consider confidential personal information protected under GS 143-318.11A1, A3, and A6, and 115C-319 to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the board in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the board, and to consult with and instruct board staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the board on the particulars of the acquisition of real property for public infrastructure improvements related to the Austin Ridge Middle School site, and to receive the board's instructions as to the position to be taken on behalf of the board in negotiations in relation thereto, and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in GS 143-318.11A3.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please note by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. We will now go into closed session. Everything is always already on here.